what I would like to address is last week's assignment. The assignment literally was to create the developer profile, to accept the invitation, to create the certificate, be able to add a device to the portal, and it turns out that I guess you guys ran into some issues because I only got maybe 3 or 4 accepted invitations and literally just 2 certificates. I'd like to hear like what the issues were, or if you just did not get the time to create the certificates. I know maybe some of you have already your own developer account, so you don't really need to use this NYU account. But in general, for you who don't have your own developer account, if you can just tell me what the issues were or if there are any, since I just need also to remind that I need somehow as well to grade all assignments, and if I don't hear back or I don't get back the project and as well in the deadline, it's going to be difficult for me to grade. You don't need to have a device to create a certificate and to be able to at least use the certificate to deploy, even if it's on the simulator. The device, of course, even for the entire class, you are not required to have a device. Just a few frameworks, they just won't work on simulator. But still, like the assignments would still need to be submitted, even if you don't have a device. So let's say for last week's assignment, the certificate would have been able to be created and accepted, and even there is no device, all the other steps are possible. Okay. Okay, I will go through a few steps just quickly to show that Xcode 5, it's much easier now to get your certificates created, or as well your devices added to a portal. Of course, there are sometimes also permission issues if you are just a member or an admin or an agent. But that's really not the issue here. It's just like making sure once your device is added to the portal that you know where to find the settings. Thanks, Melissa. I'm already recording. Thank you. So let me share Xcode. So okay, in Xcode, under Preferences, what you can have now in Xcode 5, before it was not possible, but now it is possible to even have multiple IDs. So even if you have your own individual account and you want to still like accept and see how it works with the NYU account, what I sent, you can just add a new Apple ID in here, and you will see then the name of the program. Once you select View Details, you will see what signing identities are there and what provisioning profiles are available. And the easiest way to get the latest provisioning profile is really here to hit refresh. And whatever is then on that profile will be updated and downloaded to your Xcode. So before Xcode 5, you had to log into the developer portal, you had to download the provisioning profile, you had to make sure that you delete it out of Xcode, you import it again, but that all is taken care of it right now. That's just refreshing it. And another place where you need to take a look is when you go under Windows and Organizer. In Organizer, you'll see all the devices, what you have connected. Right now I have only one device connected here, and if that green dot is there, this device is already being used as a development device. Usually what you can do is if it's not being used as a development device, you right-click or control-click on that device and add the device to a member center. And then based on the account you have set up, you will be asked and you can just choose which account you want to add it to. And Xcode does that for you. Of course, some of you had the issue because there were not enough permissions to add that device, but that was already enough for me that you figured out and you went through all the steps what is possible. So if you were not able to add the device, I was able to get your UDID from the device and I was adding it to the portal. So anyway, all of those steps, even though it was last week's assignment, if you have devices, please still submit the UDID to me so I can add it to the portal, because of course we won't need the device tonight. But if you have devices in the next classes, we will need devices, of course, if you have one, so we don't take the time then to figure out how to install it. So just, if you have devices, send me within the next couple of days, send me the UDIDs and really try to create those certificates. And Xcode will tell you, when you try to deploy on a device, will tell you need a certificate if Xcode should request one for you. So it's really, all of that manual creation is not anymore needed. That's simply all what last week's assignment was. of course, like going through the PDFs and just creating the storyboard files. I just needed to see the project what you submitted with some device screenshots. One other thing I would really appreciate if I'm giving really a deadline which gives me only 1 day to look over it. So if you're having trouble meeting that deadline, emailing me a little bit earlier than really on once the deadline is over would be much easier for me to figure out how to deal with, because I'm closing the Dropboxes and I can only grade files which are in the Dropboxes. I'm getting emails then afterwards, and even like today I got some emails with zip files from even earlier assignments. It's really difficult for me to figure out where those assignments belong to. Uploading it to the Dropbox in the given time will guarantee that you get graded for it. And I have to go, of course, through all the files and check them and give the grading. So I want to be fair to everyone. So if you're having issues submitting something, let me know in advance. Okay. Do you have any questions? Yes, you will be able to see your grades. I think I will have to double check when that or how that works. I think probably at the end. So right now, the majority of the grade are the assignments. They're 50% of the grade. So they're like participation and, of course, attendance. Attendance is as well important. One point of the grade I'm taking out is like the test take home. So I'm splitting those 20% between attendance and participation. Yeah, and like I said, assignment is like the majority of the grade, and attendance, of course. That's the thing. Now we are exactly in the middle of the class. If those assignments, how we had them until today, don't work out for you, and you want to rather like do a final project, it's fine with me if that is easier for you to like for the rest of the 4 or 5 weeks we have left. But I haven't really planned and not like a real final project, because I was just grading, or I was waiting for the assignments and only was going to grade the assignments. If you rather want a final project, it's fine with me too, but now we still have the opportunity to like decide how we're going to go with the next 5 weeks. No, Renee, if you have already your own developer account, then you can use that. You don't need to use the NYU account. Just I know of two of you guys that have an individual account. So any of the other ones who I don't know yet, if you tell me that you have an individual or like a developer account, so you don't need the NYU account, that also gives me some information that I don't need to wait for you to accept the invitation or to create a certificate. I just need to know that each of you have access to a developer account, and I made sure that we get through the NYU this developer account, so you guys have all of you have access to a real working developer account without having to pay for an individual account. So whoever of you have an individual account, just let me know so I can have my notes based on that. If we want to vote now, so I know it now, we can do that. So maybe just everyone who has an individual account, just click the yes selection and okay. What about you, Thomas and Sima? Okay, since I'm not getting a response from Thomas and Sima, I just assume they don't have an individual account. So from all of you who voted no, I'll need to make sure that you have the certificates and the NYU account set up. So if you want my help tomorrow, just contact me. From you who don't have it already set up, I know like most of you who just click no right now, the certificates are ready and it's working because we did yesterday some email exchange. Everybody else, please email me if you have any issues and need to add your device. Just email me tomorrow. So I would say if there are no other questions and if it's now clear how the grading and how the assignments are to be handled, I would just move to our next topic today. It's a tough topic today. It's not as easy as the table views and view controllers and so on. It's a little bit more than that. But if you have any other questions, then I'll answer them before I start the next topic. Okay, I assume no. So our next topic is core data. And I don't know if you have heard about core data yet. Okay, so I have placed as well the reference files into a new Dropbox today. And yeah, core data. Core data is Apple's framework basically put on top of SQLite. It works kind of as a wrapper, as a framework to make it easier for developers who don't know really the syntax and don't want to work with SQLite, with the lower level frameworks. Apple created this core data framework on top. If you go deeper into the files when we create a core data project, you will see that a SQLite database, a SQLite file is being created, and that is being worked. Of course, when you start working with core data, you can't and you shouldn't really go then and try to modify the SQLite database, which is created from Core Data. Since Core Data has its own syntax and its own prefixes and naming convention, what it's being used in Core Data. So, but let's get started with creating a new project, and I will be creating a master detail application. We haven't created yet a master detail application. What Xcode gives you with the master detail application is an application which has a navigation controller with a table view controller and a detail view controller. So you remember last week we had a lot of table view controllers, and when you select a row, you need to show a detail view controller. All of that, Xcode creates that for you in the master detail view controller. But even more than that, right now we're really only selecting to have this project created only for iPhone. But if you were to select universal, meaning this application would run on iPhone and iPad, creating a master detail application would create for the iPad a slightly different application, not just a table view controller where you have just your rows and you select and you get a detail, but it will create a split view controller where you have seen that a lot on iPad, where you have on the left-hand side and kind of like a navigation table view and then your detail view. All of that is integrated and created in this master detail application. We're still going to stick this with iPhone only, and I'm going to name this application to do CD for Core Data, so I know it's Core Data. And you see, when you select a master detail application, you get this option where you can select to use Core Data. I'm going to go back and just show the difference. If I select a single view application, we don't get this option for a single view application. We only get the option when you select a master detail application. You get also this option, I think, when we select empty application, because with an empty application, Xcode doesn't know what exactly are you trying to do. So it gives you the option to create, to include use Core Data. So back to master detail. And I will select use Core Data, and we'll be creating my folders and save this file. Now, let's see what Xcode created for us. Renee, you can either follow along, or, I mean, I have placed also the PDF in the Dropbox. Since Core Data, I will be showing way more than last week, and there are 5 PDFs. I would really like to cover all topics, all 5 topics. So it might be a little bit difficult to really follow along with everything. So what I will anyways do then as assignment is really to follow all these PDFs again on your own, and just if you have any questions, really to let me know. But if you want to follow along or a little bit along, it's up to you. Okay, so looking now at the files, we have the app delegate as we usually know have it. We have the storyboard, and in our storyboard, let's take a look here. In our storyboard, I'm going to make it a little bit smaller. You see here, we have the navigation controller, which has a table view controller, and if selected a row, a detail view controller. All of this was created for you from Xcode. Last week, we did this kind of storyboard from scratch on our own. And we'll see here as well in the navigation of the storyboard, we have the detail view controller, we have the master view controller, and the navigation controller, which literally has the relationship root view controller to the master view controller. And we have the classes, the master view controller, the detail view controller. And now you see here, this is a new file what we got. And this is the core data model. When you create a project and create a core data application, Xcode creates this data model for you and just adds one entity in there with just a timestamp. So I'm going to run this application so you know what exactly Xcode now created. We haven't modified yet anything. It's just a plain master detail view controller application. And I'm going to run it. And let me see, I have to share now a little bit more. Xcode and simulator. Okay, here's my simulator. In my simulator, I have an edit button. I have an add button. So I can add as many rows as I want. This functionality was created for you from Xcode by creating this master detail application. And selecting a row shows the detail, passes this information to the detail. Editing, you can remove rows. You can also drag and delete. But here's now the interesting part. I'm going to stop the simulator and run it again. I still have those two records left, which I had before. When we would have done that last week and removed something and add something, we wouldn't have had the latest state here. But this is as well, you can see that there is a database behind and it's working already with that database. And all we're adding here is a timestamp, and you'll see this in the data model. You see the attribute timestamp. And now let's take a look at which one. Well, let's take a look at the master detail. Let's start a little bit easier then. So, and we'll have numbers of rows and sections here, cells for row with index, and what Xcode creates for you is a few more functions when you create this master detail. It created a function called configure cell, and this configure cell, what it really does is it's just like a custom function which takes, based on the index, this managed object. You will hear three different things during this class today. We have managed object, we have persistent store coordinator, and managed object context. So all of those are being created for you when you create this application. And let's take a look in the app delegate. The app delegate has the managed object context, the managed object model, and the persistent store coordinator. The persistent store coordinator you can think of as the database schema. It is created right here, and you will see here now what I said before. There is a SQLite database behind. So all of this is being created for you. You don't need to create this on your own. So what happens here, we're getting the URL from the application documents directory, and the database name is to-do cd.sqlite. Whatever you created, your project name, Xcode uses that to create the SQLite database. And then with this URL, it creates this persistent store coordinator. So you have you don't need to take care of anything else anymore. So the persistent store coordinator, the schema is set, and no, the coordinator is the connection. Sorry, the schema is the model. We have the model, the managed object model right here, and this is being created as well from Xcode for you. So you don't need to do this on manually. And then what you have is the managed object context. The managed object context is that object which you will be using to retrieve, update, insert any object into the database using core data throughout any of your view controllers. So all of these three are set up in the app delegate, and then can be used in master detail view controller, in detail view controller, or any other controller you will be using. Now, let's go back again here to the master view controller. In master view controller, I'm going to scroll all the way up, and we'll see here that the insert new object. This is the method which was being called when I tapped on the simulator on the plus sign. What it does is it takes the context, it looks for the entity, and we're creating a new managed object. And the insert new object for entity name in managed object. So the entity itself and the context, and then this new managed object, we set the value of this new managed object for this key timestamp, and we're taking just the actual date. Now the context calls save, the method save, and whatever is being inserted, the save, it's going to save into the database using core data. Then the fetch results controller, we can see where this is coming from. Is still in master view controller. The fetch result controller, we have here an NS fetch request, and the NS entity description. We are getting all the entity that the name event of this in the context manage object context, and then setting the fetch batch size. This is all what Xcode does automatically for you. We have a sort descriptor. The sorting we're setting timestamp, the column timestamp as the sort descriptor. And where do we have? We perform fetch. You don't need really to remember all of this, since you'll see we created this project and all of this was created. We'll get into details of how you modify, how you get one specific row, but you'll see it's a lot what Xcode already creates for you. So if you were to add core data to an existing project, all of this functionality you would have to add on your own. The easiest is just create an empty project and see what are the mandatory functionalities which Xcode would anyways create for you. Otherwise, you would have to take some notes and really make sure that you don't forget any of those functionalities. But okay, what we will be doing is, to make it really simple, is I'm going to delete what Xcode created for us. I'm going to delete these, the master view controller and the detail view controller. Just going to delete this and move it to trash. And I'm going to create a new Objective-C class, and I'm going to call this the Master View Controller, and of subclass UI Table View Controller. I don't need any interface. Just going to create this class, and I'm going to add in the header file of my new master view controller, I'm going to add a property with a managed object context. And it's managed object context. And in Storyboard, I'm just going to remove the detail view controller, since right now we're not going to have a detail view controller. And in the master view controller, we're using now the new one which we just created. In our data model, I will be deleting this entity event. And there is one more thing which I will be showing in the data model. You have different editor styles. You have, like the editor style table graph table better, but there is also a graph where you can actually see when you create an entity and how they're linked together. So I will be creating a new entity, and this new entity, I will call it I will add new attributes actually to it, and add an attribute and call it name. And the type of the attribute is going to be string. And I will be adding, actually, I'm going to call it to-do name, so it's a little bit clearer. And I will add another attribute. And this is going to be to-do description, as well going to be a string, and another attribute, to-do note, as well string. So now when you change to the editor style, you'll see your entity, how this entity looks like. I'm going to call this to-do info. Like you can see, it really doesn't matter where you change the entity information. If you do it either in the editor style or in the table view. Now let's do quickly something over here. Some arrows. I need to remove this as well. Right now we have only one entity, but I will be creating another entity, and this one I will be calling it to-do detail. So now you can see we have two different entities, and we have the to-do info and to-do description. We can add here as well attributes, and what are the attributes we need here? Let's say we have here a due date. And this due date, we're setting it to date. That's all that we need right now. But we want a relationship between these two entities. And what we can do is we can control and drag from one entity to another. Let me show. Yeah. And you'll see now that these two entities are connected to each other, and this relationship, yes, these would be like the tables. And what you can also now create, you can set up this relationship here. And the most important is the delete rule. If you have a record in to-do info, and each to-do info has one to-do detail, if you delete a to-do info, that should also delete the to-do detail, and the other way around. So the delete rule, we would set this to cascade. So whenever you would delete a to-do info, the to-do detail would be deleted as well. It really depends on what relationship you have between objects. Let's say you have another table called tags, and tags are used for multiple objects. Then, of course, you just nullify, or yeah, that's what you would do. And yeah, that's all what we need so far here. You can set a name for this relationship so that it's clear when you look at to-do detail, you have one attribute and one relationship info. If you look at to-do info, you have all these attributes, and then you have a relationship to a details entity. Now, let me just clean up a little bit in here. So since I deleted some functionality, I will need to clean up. That was not available anymore. Now, if I were to run this application now, this is one really important thing to know. This application will crash. And that's because we changed the data model. So once you have an application using core data, you have created a data model, you have created all your entities, you have deployed this application, you need to be careful when you change any of the entities. Like in SQL or in any other database, you would need to upgrade the code, and you would need to upgrade the database. If you change any tables, any columns, you add any tables to it. So the same thing you need to do here too, but that is part of the 5th PDF. So the easiest for you right now is just to delete that application from the simulator. Let me run this. It really should crash. Well, it doesn't, because I'm not really using it yet. So it's not being created. So let's just implement a little bit more. So we have okay. Small. I'm going to import the master. The master view controller. And there you go. There is our crash. Now that we're really trying to access the core data, it's crashing for us because when I show you this, so you see that the model used to open the store is incompatible with the one used to create the store. So we created before, we deployed the application, and now it's crashing because whatever is already deployed on the simulator, it's already there. There is a database there. Every time you deploy an application and you have that application already installed, either in simulator or on device, the data is already there. So the database is not being created over and over completely new. So what I will do is I will go in simulator and just reset the content, the easiest you can do. I'm resetting the entire simulator. You can also just delete that application that does the same thing. Now when I run this application, it works. So a new database has been created now since we did not have an application installed before. Now what I will do is, let me open up in order to use these entities as classes, there is one simple way Xcode helps you with creating classes for these entities. You can select the entities and create new classes by clicking Command N. And in the templates menu, you have your core data. And what we're looking to create are managed objects. So you will see we're not looking for a data model, not for a mapping model. We're looking for an NS managed object. And we get a selection of what data models we have available. We only have one, and that is selected. We hit next, and then we get shown the entities which are available to be created as classes. They're also pre-selected, so we just hit next, and once we create those classes, you will see what Xcode will do for you. So we have here a to-do-info class, and in this to-do-info class, we have the class identifier to-do detail. You'll see that this to-do-info class is a subclass of NS managed object, and Xcode created for you all the properties we created in the model. We have a to-do name, description, to-do note, and the detail. And the details is, since it is a relationship to another class, it's to-do detail. You can take a look at to-do detail, the header class, and you'll see here as well, to-do detail is subclass from NS managed object, and you have the property NS date. We had a due date. Now you might think, why is this called NS managed object? And I'm actually expecting the to-do info. Here's the thing. Xcode creates one file at a time. So by the time Xcode created this to-do detail, there was no to-do info class yet available, but Xcode knows it is an NS managed object. So let's say you would do the same thing again and create new NS managed object and select data model, and you select the to-do detail. You can select both. It's really, and now you can replace already existing classes. What's happened now is when you look now into the detail, you have the to-do info created here as well. So yeah, you could do a manually modifying if something is missing here, or you just go through the creating new managed object twice, and Xcode updates whatever is there, because since Xcode then already has those classes available. In the implementation file, all you have is these lines, and you should not be changing those. These are the only place where you will see that add dynamic just tells Xcode that those classes are being dynamically, or those properties are being dynamically created from core data. You don't need to do anything with them, just they need to be there, so Xcode knows how to deal with them, since they're being dynamically created when they're needed through core data. Now, what's next? What we have next is, I'm going to show you in this project. So we still have to do details, and in our master view controller, what we are adding is the following. In Vue.load, we're creating a fetch request, and we are creating an entity description, and we're looking to fetch all the data which are located in to-do info. And let me move this. And we have here the entity. We're creating it from the NSManaged object context. To-do info. Fetch request, we're setting the entity what we're looking for. And now we have here in our master view controller, let me show you again, an init array to-do infos. And this init array to-do infos from our managed object context, we're executing this fetch request. And if there are any errors, we're saving them in errors. We're setting the title to do. That's all we're doing here. We have a number of sections in table. It's just one section. We don't need to do here much more. Number of rows in section. We're taking the count from this array. To do info count. And now we have in cell for row at index, we still know about the cell identifier. We're creating or dequeuing a reusable identifier with the cell identifier. Now, out of our array, we're getting the to-do info of the row. And we have here the to-do name, we're placing that as text label, and the description, we're placing that as detailed text label. And that's all what we're doing here. Let's run this application. Once we run this application, we have one to-do here. And why we have one to do is because we added it. I'm showing this in app delegate. So in our app delegate, the context, the way we create a new entry is we have the to-do info, and we are creating an entity description with the method insert new object for entity name to-do. This will create a new entry for using to-do info. Then we just need to set the to-do name, the description, the notes. As well, we need a new to-do detail. So we create this due date, update date, whatever the attributes are, and then to-do info, we set the details for to-do detail. We're saving. Since you see here, the contact is being passed while we create this new entity. And whenever you are done, it's literally like a commit in SQL. The contact saves whatever the contact has in memory so far. We will be saving it, and what we do is to make sure that it was saved, we can run a fetch right here. And this is all still in app delegate, so we can run a fetch for the to-do info. And here you can see that whenever you fetch a to-do info, Core Data not only fetches that one table, you don't need to do a join like you need to do it in SQL. Core Data fetches all the to-do details as well. So even though there are two different table entities, all information will be fetched. And just take a look when I run this in the code. So we have here name and we have priority. Priority is part of detail, and you see it's being fetched as well. Now we should have two. Do you have any questions so far? Yes, it creates a permanent SQLite database on the device for this application. Like, actually, it's located in the applications directory. And it only can be accessed by this application. So the interesting part actually in iOS is that there are tons of those SQLite databases. Even the address book works on a SQLite database. There is, and the Apple's address book has an internal SQLite database where all the information are located, and it literally works the same way as it works if you create your own SQLite or your own Core Data. And yeah, if you create your own application with Core Data, you have your own SQLite database for this application. Now, what I'm going to show you is you have the ability, let me see if I can, to add, to show literally what's happening behind the scene when you run an application with Core Data. I'm going to edit this scheme, and under arguments, I'm going to add, I think it's right here. data SQL dot.get1. This should work. If I add this argument, I should be able to see now, whenever I run this application, I should be able to see the logs, what's happening behind the scenes when running this application with core data. And there you go. So you'll see that there is SQL behind it. And you'll see where the SQL database is located. So in Simulator, you actually would be able to go to the terminal and go to this location, and you will see this SQLite database in there. You don't need to do that now, but you can take a look maybe tomorrow or like whenever you get a chance. Take a look in this documents directory and what other files are included in there. You can just go to the terminal of your Mac and navigate to this folder, and you will see the SQLite database, and you'll see here it's select statements and the begin execution and commits. It's all this is what's happening behind the scenes just for creating an entry. What are we creating here? We're inserting into details, and we're inserting into info. And you'll see here that the table structure, the table names, what Xcode or what core data created in this SQLite database, it's not really readable as you would think. So therefore, it's not recommended to change anything here. But yeah, in that PDF which I provided as a reference, there is this line. I'm showing it again. So if you go click on the active scheme and you edit the scheme, you just add it as an argument, and then you will see the log files for core data. Now, we created, let me go back here. We created here the to-do info and to-do detail. All those, what you sometimes might only see that this is just an NF managed object. So let me show you quickly. If you don't have the classes for these managed objects, what you also can do is you can access this information using NS managed object. Actually, I already have there the object, so I'm going to call it info, NS managed object detail. And the way you access it, this value for key, and depends on what the key here is, detail. And if, let's say, we would want to print out Let me do this, copy this. We would need value for key to do name. So now you see here, instead of accessing to do info and then there directly what the to do name is, you can also, if you don't have these classes, you can always get the values by from the NS managed object value for key. And if we run this, let me just, with the name, it's actually enough. You see here the name. This came from the NS managed object. So sometimes you might not really see that there are always a class for each of the entities. So you can always, similar to when we're looking into an NS dictionary and the value for key, you have this possibility here as well. Now, do you have any questions to this? Okay. The next which I would want to show is if you need to preload any data to your application. Let's create no, there is no problem too much data overloading the device, because you can, not all data gets fetched at the altogether at the same time. You can set up how many rows at a time, how many records at a time should be fetched. So Core Data knows then, that's why it's actually, Core Data is has a better performance than if you were to use SQLite itself. In SQLite, if you do a select all rows in a specific table, you will get all the results at once. In Core Data, you can set up how many rows you want while you scroll up and down. You don't want, like, let's say you have thousands of rows, you don't want to fetch all of them at once. You just want those which are being displayed right there. And I will be showing that as well. So, okay, so let's see first how we can preload data into when like right now what we're doing here is every time we're running this application, we're adding one row into the database, and we have here now 4 rows, but you might want to preload some data when you deliver your app to to the users. And the way I have here a little application which creates a database, and this database we will be using to preload data. So in this application, it's the same thing. We have here to do info, we have to do detail, but this application is actually a command line application. It's just like a tool to create data, and we're using this JSON object. Based on this JSON object, we're creating the database. And in our main file, you'll see we have the context. We're saving this context with the path to the JSON object. We're getting the path to the JSON object. We're creating an array out of this JSON object, and then we're enumerating through this JSON array and creating these to-do infos. So the same what we created before, just like with this one to-do, now we're enumerating through the entire JSON object, and we're creating multiple entries, and every time we created one entry, we're saving the context. And once we're done creating this database, we're just making sure we're fetching the entire to-do info, and so we'll see if all the information are being passed. So I'm running this application, and you can see here in the log we have the imported to-dos where all the JSON information are displayed, and then fetching from core data, we're getting all these to-dos displayed. Now, as I mentioned, this is just a tool to create the SQL database. And the way, now, somewhere on your computer there is a SQL database. And the way we find the SQL database is when you look at the navigation, the file navigator, you have here under product, you have an application. When you right click on this one or control click, you can show in Finder. And in Finder, you cannot see that right now, but when you click show in Finder, let me take a screenshot and upload this to just give me a second so I can upload that screenshot. Okay, input image. And you see, this is the content of your folder when you right click or control click and show the application in Finder. And you see we have there the JSON file, we have the database model, And we have here the SQLite database. What we will be doing is just we will take the SQLite database and going into our to-do application, and we just place it anywhere, either in supporting files or just anywhere in your application. Once we have that here, we only can work with the SQLite database if it is located in the documents directory of the application. This is not the documents directory, so we have no access. If we are in Xcode, we have no access to the documents directory. What we need to do is we have to copy it there. So let's take a look how we copy this SQLite into the documents directory. So, okay. Now, we said the persistent store coordinator is our database connection. And there we have access, and the SQLite database is being set. Now, we can check. This is the code which we add to check if there is already a database or not. So in Xcode, we have this object called NS File Manager, and we can check if a file exists at a specific path. So this store URL, the SQL file, has a path, and we will be checking here if this SQLite does not exist. We will preload from an existing SQL database. And what we do is the same way we get the path for a resource, like before we had that for plist or for images. The same way we can get the path for this resource core data tutorial SQLite, and that's how it's called here. And then we copy this item from this URL to the store URL. Then we have everything what is in core data tutorial SQLite, we will copy into to-do CD SQLite. This is all you need to copy it. If I run this application now, let me make sure that it's not running anywhere else. Okay, probably. We have still only those to-dos which we had before. So there is no difference, but only because the file already exists. So if I'm going to reset the content of the simulator. I'm going to run this application again, and then you'll see all of these to-dos which we had in the JSON file and which we created from the JSON file, a SQLite file, are being added into here. Now, if I run again, these to-dos 1 to 4 are not being imported again, because that only happens if the database here does not exist. So this is not being executed every time the application runs. So this is the easiest way to import, to preload existing data. Now, of course, if you already have, like right now we created a little tool to create our core data SQLite database, you could have as well just done it right here without having to copy a SQLite database. You could have just, like, if you have data coming from a web services, you would fetch it from the web services and enter it there, or if you have it just in a file which you will provide or submit with the application. So it's not always necessary that you create first the SQLite database, but this is just like to show how you would create from a JSON file a SQLite database. Any questions so far? Okay, since I will be showing next how to work with relations and predicates, and I would say the best is to take now the 10-minute break and then continue with the next two topics. Is that okay with you guys? Okay. Then I'll set the timer for 10 minutes. Okay. Let's continue this. How to work with relations and predicates. In this part of the tutorial, what I will be showing is a little bit more than just what has to do with core data. So we know so far how to work with storyboard only and with NID file only. Now, in this part, I will show how you can work, how you can mix it, how you can use starting off with the storyboard and at some point in your code, adding NID files, which makes sometimes sense if you get code from, if you work with more than one developer on one project and you get code from another developer to implement it in your code. You want to be able to add NID files into your project. So our storyboard has the navigation controller with the master view controller as its root view controller. and the master view controller, what we're doing here is, instead of using the storyboard, let's go to the did select row at index. What we're doing here is we're using in did select row at index, we're creating an instance of the detail view controller and pushing this detail view controller onto the navigation controller. So what's happened is this was not needed if we use completely storyboards, because the segue knew which controller would be called. Since we want to be able to add a different NIP controller, what we need to do is just instantiate the detail view controller, the controller which we want to show, and push it onto the view. Let me just run this application. Actually, yeah. Okay. So this navigation controller, push view controller, the detail view controller, what happens is when I click did select row, it looks exactly the same as if it were connected with storyboard, but it is a NIP file. So to take a look again into this detail view controller, we have the detail view controller and we have the NIP file itself. So this shows exactly how you can mix and match storyboard and NIP files. Sometimes, like I said, it's necessary and it's good to know how to do that. Now, another thing which I want to show is how you add buttons to the navigation bar as well. What if they had another storyboard? You can, that's a good question. You can probably use different storyboards. You can create different storyboards in one project. I haven't really seen it that way yet, but I will get these information and let you know exactly how you would call one storyboard from another. But it is possible. I just haven't really done it. Okay, so yeah, like I said, I'll get back to you on that. They're in different purposes. Like if you have a project and you have like some sort of like a library project which you're using in multiple projects, you'll add that project to your project. But if it's just, let's say you have a tabbed application and for each tab you have a different storyboard. The storyboard is included in your project. It's not, yeah, like a lot of the free source code out there, they include different projects in projects. What they're trying to do with that is like to create some sort of libraries. I don't like that approach at all. So there are ways to create a library and a framework itself, and I can definitely give you some information on that, not here and in this class here today, but I can send you some information how to create a library. But I don't like really the way projects are included in projects. it always causes different issues because some files are always missing somewhere, and those projects need to be compiled before they can really be used. So if you can avoid it, just avoid it. Like, don't use it if you can. And sometimes if you get a project like that, just take those classes out of that project and copy it into your own instead of like using the entire project, because most of the time it's what you need is some of the classes inside that project. You don't need the extra project configuration inside your own project. Okay. So, okay. You know, when you see the buttons on the navigation bar, you can either add those buttons in your storyboard, which we here didn't do it. We could, but we didn't. And the other way to do it is adding those buttons via code, and you will see this a lot in different other code or samples, that a button is being set in code when the view loads. And most of the time you do that because you can change what your button will look like. So if you were to have here an edit button, once you press that edit button, you would want to change that to a done button. So you need to know how to do that in code and not just in storyboard. And the way you do it is you call, and that works for every project which is a navigation controller-based project. And you call on self, navigation item, and each navigation controller has a left bar button and a right bar button. And then you create a UI bar button and initialize it with whatever system icon you want to use. And set the target to self, and the action would be then whatever functionality you want to call. In this one, the left bar button is add, the right bar button is show search. So in add, we're just adding, we already saw this code before. So what we're doing here is we're creating a new to-do info, we're creating a new to-do detail, we're setting the to-do info's detail to this new to-do detail, and saving the managed object context. Okay, I see there's a question. Can you process massive data in another platform, cloud, then output via iOS device? You cannot process any data directly from iOS into like on another platform. Let's say you cannot access a database, let's say a SQL database, directly from iOS. So everything what you can access is local. Everything what is external, you will need to implement some sort of services which do the work and return the results. But let's say you have on some sort of server a MySQL database, and you cannot have a connection directly from iOS to that database. It's just not possible. I hope this answered the question, Charles. Okay. So, yeah, what we have here, we have the add to do, the show search. The function show search is defined right here, and here as well. What we're doing, we're creating an instance of the search view controller, which here as well is we have a search view controller created and has its own NIT file, and I'll get to that controller right in a second. We're passing to the search controller as well the managed object context, because we already have it, so we should just use one managed object context and not create over and over new context. It's kind of like creating new connections and having multiple connections open. And since the search, we're not pushing the search view controller onto the navigation controller, we're just presenting that view controller. But still, we're using it on the navigation controller and present view controller. The way it looks is this. If you tap on the search, it will be presented like a model view controller, and then you have here your search area, and the close button would just dismiss that controller. Now, if we're looking into now the search view controller, what we have here is we created a property, the managed object context, and this is the property which we're passing from the previous controller. Then we have the fetch results controller, because in this search, we want to be able to show inside the search without like leaving this view controller. We want to show the result. So this is the fetch results controller, that's what it uses. Then we have an IB outlet for the search bar and for the table view. And we have as well an UI label if there are no results. Now, let's take a look in the implementation. In the implementation, when the view loads, we set different delegates. And this is also only to show that you can set the delegates and the data sources using code instead of doing that in the NIT file. So there are always different ways of where you can set your delegates. We know it from the last two classes that we wired them up, we connected them in the NIT file, but we can do that in code as well. And here's the interesting part, the label. I'm going to go into this, the NIT file. We don't have here a label set. So we have the toolbar, we have the table view, we have the search bar, and that's it. So, but when I search for something which is not available, I want to show this label here. And the way we do this is we create a new label. We add this label to as a subview to the view of this view controller. We can set then the text for this label. And what we do is we hide this label. We set the property hidden to yes. So it's just prepared, it's there, and whenever we search then, and if we don't find any results, we would show this label. Now, we know the close search, that's the button here, close. All what we need to do is dismiss view controller. And then this view controller would be just hide it. And search bar, search button click. This is a delegate method from, and I'll show you that. We have here a few protocols implemented. And what we have is, we already know the UI table view delegate. We already know the UI table view data source. Then now we have the NS Fetch Results Controller delegate and the UI Search Bar delegate. And because we implemented the protocol UI Search Bar delegate, we have search bar, search button clicked. That's a delegate method from that UI Search Bar delegate. When the search bar search is clicked, then we're performing on the fetch result controller, we're performing a fetch. If there is an error, we'll show error in search. If there is no error, we are refreshing, we're reloading the table data. We're resigning first responder from the search bar. What this means is we're hiding the keyboard. So we're taking the focus off this search field. And you'll see, and then we're setting the label hidden if the count is greater than 0, then we're setting the label to hidden. Otherwise, it will be shown. Number of sections in table, we already have that. It's just one section. Then now we have number of rows in sections. The Fetch Results Controller has a property called sections, and then we get the section info, and the section info has number of objects. All this information is in this Fetch Results Controller. We get the information, what was the Fetch Results controller based on the section, the number of objects. And the configure cell at index, this is being called in here right there. It's just another method, so not to have everything in one. We have the cell for row at index, we create our UI table cell, and we call configure cell at index, where we are getting from our fetched results controller the object at index. And since the result is going to be a to-do info, that's all we need to do. We use the name and the description to show the cell information. And again, we'll see here how now the search and the fetch results controller works. So we already had before the fetch request the entity as well. We're looking for to-do info. Now, the sort descriptor, what we're doing is we want the sorting to be based on the due date. So depends on the due date here, that's what our sort descriptor is going to be. We're setting for this fetch request the sort descriptor, and here it is. We set the fetch batch size, meaning 20 rows at a time are being fetched and no more. Once you scroll more up and you need more, core data does the rest for you and gets the next 20 rows. And now we're creating this predicate because we know we have to take under consideration what we're searching for. If you're searching for a specific term, and here is, and I can give you a list of what you can type in here. For now, this is case sensitive. So the predicate, we're creating a predicate with a format. We're looking for to-do name contains the exact name, what is being typed in the search bar. And we're still in the fetch request. We're setting the predicate for this fetch request. And then we're creating this fetch result controller. The fetch result controller, we're initializing it with this fetch request, and the managed object context, we already have this. We don't need any key path and cache name. And the results controller, we're setting this results controller to our property here. Now, let me see if I don't know, it was a little different. I'll get you the exact syntax how you can do case sensitive. I think I have it anyways in the PDF. Let's just quickly take a look. Okay, it is right here. Okay, so after the contains, if you type in the square bracket and a lowercase c, that means everything what is being typed is going to be not case sensitive. If you don't add this, it's case sensitive. But I have more information. Like I said, I have more information in the PDF and how you can combine the predicate format. So you could be doing something like this. Contains and then you'll pass the search thing here twice. This should work. So if you're searching for to do, you'll find the records where either the search term is in to-do name or to-do description. So this is all you need to do, is knowing really how to create your predicates. But like I said, I have different IC. It might be the same thing, because if the C is, I've never used IC because adding the C means basically ignore case sensitive, but let's try this. Never added I've always used it the way either add the C or not. It's I guess it doesn't matter if you have the IC or just a C. So what we are doing next is we're going to add a few more functionality to this. you see how when I select a row, I can, of course, you already know text fields, how to work with text fields. But these fields here, they're not text fields, they're labels. And the way we created these, let me show you in the detail view controller. Those labels, we added to those labels. Go all the way up. We have the right bar button and the detail view controller. Whenever the right bar button is being pressed, the Save to Do info is being called. And what this does is takes whatever we have in the fields and in the labels and saves it to the Managed Object Context. But in this case, we're checking if this to-do info, Managed Object Context, has any changes. We're saving it. If it does not have any changes, we don't need to save. So let's say we are just selecting this and clicking, for whatever reason, we're clicking Save. There's nothing to save. So we're making sure that we're not like calling save on an object which does not really need to be saved. Once this is either saved or ignored, we are calling on Navigation Controller, Pop View Controller, meaning this controller will be popping to the Previews controller. Now, that was the right bar button. Now we need, a label usually does not have a click or a tap or git select or any of this. What we need to create some tap gesture recognizers. So first thing we do is, for the date label, we're setting the user interaction enabled to yes. Then we're creating a tap recognizer, tap gesture recognizer. And when this date tap recognizer is tapped, we are selecting the method date tapped. This UI tap gesture recognizer we're setting to the date label, we're adding it as gesture recognizer. Now, what will happen is, whenever this label date will be tapped, we want to show a date picker. So let's see how we show a date picker. We go on date tapped. We have just created another like show picker. And what it does is we're making sure that in case any field has its first responder, we're just resigning all first responders. Then what we're creating is we're creating an animation. We're begin animations, and the name here you can use any name you want. And we're setting the animation duration, and the date picker, we're setting the transform from 0 show picker to -216. So the date picker is already existing. We're just moving it up. And when we call commit animation, this animation will be executed. The same reverse. If we need to hide the picker, we'll just set not the -216, we just set the 216. So, meaning if we click on somewhere else, this date picker will hide. That was with the date picker. What else do we have? Okay, we have the date picker. Now, well, you need to specify to tab somewhere else. Like even, it's not like everything, nothing here is being provided. So if you need, right now, if you need to hide the keyboard when you tap on the view, that is a function which is being added as a tap recognizer as well. And you can see this here. The UI, we're creating a gesture recognizer to dismiss the keyboard and to dismiss anything like, yeah. And we're adding this gesture recognizer to the view controller's view. Usually if we wouldn't, we would not have this, and we would run this application, we would click on the, let's say, text field. It would not hide the keyboard itself. Even if you see that in a lot of applications that a keyboard is being hidden when you tap outside the text field, that is something you need to program. So users usually expect that. So if you're having an application which has a keyboard which you're expecting the user somehow to dismiss the keyboard by just tapping somewhere outside, you need to provide this and provide this functionality to the application as well. So therefore, in this example, you see a lot of can you tap the text? Which text? Like, yeah, I mean the text field works as a regular text field in general. How you're used to, you can tap the text, you can select it. All of that is part of the text field. Okay. If the picker is and you tap the text, of course the keyboard goes now on top of that picker. It doesn't do it automatically that it hides that picker. So you need all the functionality. When something needs to be hidden, you need to do it yourself. So I might not have every single scenario here in this example, where I click the date and then I click on the priority or on something else outside. All of these, when something needs to be shown and hidden, you need to implement it your own. So, like I said, I might not have every gesture recognizer on doing everything what it needs to do, but it's just really a lot of information here what you could be doing. So, like in here especially, that you can add different tap gesture recognizers to labels, which is not usually that obvious, since normally labels are just, as the name says, just to label out something, but sometimes other than adding a button, you won't have much possibilities to add a functionality on something else than a button. So yeah, then what we have here, we have a tags label, and as you saw here when I tapped on the date picker showed up. Now when I tap, this is the tags label. When I tap on this label, I'm showing a new view controller. So what it happens is priority tabbed, not priority tabbed, tags, tab record manager, and what we're doing here, where is it? Here, tags tabbed. What we're doing is we are pushing a view controller when the tag label is tapped. We're pushing a view controller, and here's this. We're just making sure that all the other pickers are being hidden. So, like I said, I might not have this everywhere where it's supposed to be, but you would need to figure out the workaround where you need to hide which fields and pickers and keyboards when you tab something specific. So now the tagless view controller is a new view controller, is a list. What we're doing here is we're creating different tags. Sorry. A tag, I just named these tags. It could be any other table name or any other other entity name what you want to use, but I just called it tag. So let's create a tag 2. So now we know already this when selecting a row and deselecting. We had this functionality before. So what I'm doing is I created 2 different tags and I'm selecting those. When I go back to this to do, I will see it is tagged, like it has been added to 2 different tags. And I can go ahead here and maybe change it. So what happens is in this tagless view controller, we created our own init method. And in this init method, we're passing the to-do info detail, because this to-do info detail has information about the tags. Now, before I continue with this, I'll need to show you what our data model looks like now. We had to-do info, we had to-do detail. Now we have in to-do detail a set of tags. And we'll look into the data model and we'll see here now we had the info, we had the detail, and now we have this entity tag. All it has its name and its relationship to to-do detail. And let's look at this. We have the type, too many, and the delete rule, nullify. Just to compare it with our to-do info and to-do detail, I'm selecting this connection here, and it says type to 1. So one to-do info has one to-do detail and the other way around. And cascade, once it's deleted, once an info is deleted, a to-do detail will be deleted. But the tags, we cannot, if we delete a tag, we cannot delete the detail. So we're nullifying, the delete rule is nullify, and one to-do detail can have many tags. So now, going back to our to-do detail, And we have the tag list view controller. In the tag list view controller, let me go in the interface, we have the to-do detail, which we need to pass a selected to-do detail to this view controller. Then we have a property called picked tags. We have here as well the fetch result controller and the init method which we created. Init this to-do details. This is being called when the tag list view controller is being pushed to the navigation controller. So when it's being pushed to the navigation controller, the to-do detail is being set with the past detail, and you'll see here as well the regular init method it's being called. In our view did load, we are initializing the picked tags. And why we need it here as well, the fetch result controller, because those tags are in our core database as well. We're performing a fetch on the fetch result controller, and all the tags from our to-do details, we're setting these to the picked tags. What this means is if we're selecting here the tag list view controller, our view controller needs to know which ones are picked to set the check mark. So we're just saving this into an NS set, and where do we have that? And in self-heroic index, we're checking if this tag exists in the set of picked tags, so we can set the accessory type to a check mark. And in did-select-heroic index, we're taking the tag from the fetch results control based on the index path. We are setting the cells, selecting, set selected to no. And we're checking in this part exactly. We had this I think last week or the week before, where we selected a row and checked if it was selected or not. So if it was selected, if it is in picked tags, then we're removing it from picked tags and we're removing the check mark. If it's not in picked tags, we are adding it to picked tags and we're setting the check mark as an accessory tag. So simply we're unselecting the row. You see the gray, I don't know if you see it on my screen because it might be too light, but if I keep it selected, you see the gray. Once I let it go, then it's unselected. So all that is happening here in did select heroic index. We had self-heroic index. We had this. And what we have as well is, and we did that last week or the week before, if we need to add a new tag, and of course you can create a new view controller to add a new tag. Since in our case we only have one field in that database and it's the tag name, we can just use an alert view, and this alert view, when it's being created with the title new tag, the message, insert new tag name, the cancel button, and other buttons titles. All we have here is new tag, insert new tag name, cancel, and save. And what we need to set is the alert view style, so we get to see the plain text input. Before we just used UI alert views without a text field. But the alert view can do much more. You can even add like a username and password alert view. So you don't always need to create an entire view controller if you want to just capture one or two information. In our case, we want just one information. We'll save it. And what happens here is once the button is clicked, and it doesn't matter which of these buttons, we need to check here if the button index is 0. We do nothing. In this case, we just show an islog. Otherwise, since we only have 2 buttons, if we were to have multiple buttons, we have to check for the other indexes as well. What we do is we take the tag name, and since we have one text field, the alert view text field at index 0, and take that text from that text field. We're creating a new tag with an entity descriptor, insert new object for entity for name. That's the entity name. And we have our managed object context. We are setting this tag name, and we're saving the managed object context. What we're doing is we're performing, again, a fetch on the fetch results controller, and we're reloading the table view. So what happens is, if we click save, we're saving this into the core data database, and we're requesting the new result and refreshing the table view. If we were not to do these 2 lines, then the new tag will not show here until you go back and select the to-do detail again. Now, we don't have here, when we select the tags for this detail, for this to-do, we don't have here a save button anywhere. But we still want to save this selection. This is a back button, so it's not really that we can access that button when that button is being pressed. But what we can do is, we know that once this button is being pressed, the method view will disappear is being called. And in view will disappear, what we will be doing is we will be setting all the picked tags, and those are all which have the check mark. We will set it to the to-do detail tag, and we will save the to-do details managed object context, so that we have the tags showing and saved for this detail. What else do we have here? We don't have any other specific. The fetch results controller is just to fetch all the tags in the database. View did load, we got that. That's all what we have in the tag list view. Let's go again into the detail. Did I forget here anything? No. And view will appear. Right, so what we do here as well, since when you selected a tag and you go back, the method view will appear, will be called. So we need to update if there is any change to the tags. So what we're doing here is in the tag label, we're we're creating an array of these tags, and we're joining them with a string, with a comma string. So therefore we get these tags just listed with a comma separation. So if we were not to do that, in view will appear, then every time you save a tag and go back to this detail view, it will not refresh. So depends on how your app works. You have to make sure that you put the functionality in the right places. If you need something really only to be in view did load gets only called once when the view controller loads, not when you can visibly see it, when the view controller for the application loads. So in the view controller, I'll show you here, when you select the row, this view controller is being loaded now. View will appear as being called after view did load. When you select a tag and go back, view did load is not being called again because the view is already loaded. It just appears again. So those are like really fine things which you need to know based on how you will update your view. Okay, what do we have here? Okay, so what we have is also the delete functionality. The delete functionality, let me just maybe add a few more. If you swipe, and that's also one thing with iOS 7, before you were able to swipe left or right, and the delete button would appear. Now, since iOS 7, you can only, if you want the delete button, you have to swipe from right to left to get the delete button to appear. And how this delete works, in our master view controller, we have one method, can edit row at index. We set this just to yes, so our view controller knows that it can edit the rows. Then we have commit editing style, and now we need to check if the edit style is UI table view cell editing style delete. Then from the managed object context, we delete the object from fetch results controller object at index and pass the index path. And the same as when we create an insert, this is kind of like the delete statement, and we have to call save on the managed object context. Every time you insert or you edit or you delete anything, you have to have this, just make it a rule to always have these couple of lines to save the context. If you don't save the context, the delete will not perform. That's that. And here's like another example how to create a short descriptor. We set the fetch batch size to 20. Let me see if I can show if Um, Let me add the data equal debug. Debug 1. Data equal debug 1. That should work. No. Output code data. Okay, so let's do this. I'm just going to add like a few rows that I want to show how the rows are being fetched from core data. And you see here, fetching 20, then it's fetching another 20, and then it's fetching the rest. So depends on what you have set up here, the performance will be taken care of, because you're not requesting everything at the first fetch. If you're not setting the size, let's see, for row 10, and while you scroll, it should just get the mix of the rows. Do you have any questions so far? No? No. Autocomplete function when searching data. What exactly do you mean by that? Oh, okay. I don't think so. Because the predicate, I can definitely take a look at that. All what I have used so far is when creating predicates, and that's not just like in core data. You'll have to do that with this format. But it's a good question. I'll make a note of that, and I will take a look if there is anything which I doubt it. I really doubt it, because the core data managed objects, they don't have any real association to the classes. Like, let's say if you change the, let's say the attributes here, it doesn't change automatically your classes. You have to generate those classes again or update them again. So therefore, I would just say I don't think there is an autocomplete, but I'll definitely take a look. Okay, now I have one more important, which I'm not going to be able to go through every single detail to really show it how it works, but let's see what I can do. Updating a data model. If you have an app out there with core data, now you're updating your data model. Let's say we created a brand new application, and but this is also in the fifth PDF is called How to Perform a Lightweight Core Data Migration. So you need to update the data model. If you add an attribute, if you add an entity, if you change the entity name, whatever you change here, you need to upgrade this data model. And the way it would work is you create a new version of the model. And you can see this here, that the new version of this model, the first one was just the regular one what Apple created for us, entity name, event, there's a timestamp, and then we ran the application, so the database was created. Now we need to update this model, so we created a new version of this data model. And the way you create a new version is when you select this core data model and you go on the Xcode navigation menu editor and you select add model version. What it creates is, like, based on the model, you can select based on which model it is. Like, since I already have here two, let's create it based on the second. So it's add 3 at the end. And you will see here, the first one, the active model has this check mark, the green check mark. And now what you would do is you create a version, you create the changes here to I'm just going to call it Y. And once this is created, then what you do is you select the model itself, and let me see, where is it? And under File Inspector, you can see what the current model version is. And you select the current model version, and you see the check mark is moving to the another another model version. Now, of course, this is not all what you need to do if you migrate or if you change the data model. Everywhere in your code where you were using, let's say before you were using events or you were using timestamp, you need to now update the keys wherever you were using the previous entities and attributes. So if, let's say, we added here the attribute Y and we want to use that, or we changed it, we need to change it here in code as well. So you have to make sure that everything has been changed to the new model. And once you run this, let me close this first. I mean, this should anyways work, but I will show it with a brand new application. Maybe that will work in 2 seconds. I'm creating Okay, so when I create a new application with the data model, I'm going to run this on the simulator. Now, I have already the data in here. So if I need to create a new version, I'm creating new model version. I'm setting this new model version as the current version. I'm changing timestamp to where. I'm doing too much changes here. But now, the best thing to do is search for timestamp. Whatever timestamp is being used, I'm going to use where. Changing this, and I'm not changing it here because that's the old model. So if everything works fine, my application still should run. Because before the attribute was called timestamp, I'm updating it to where. I updated everywhere in code the occurrence of timestamp to where. Running this application now, I should not be causing any issues. But maybe I forgot something. Okay. Store. There's something missing. Okay, we need to add that the model has changed in under after persistent coordinator and it's managed object. Okay, we need to create a dictionary options, and in this dictionary we have to set NS migration persistent automatically to yes, and insert mapping automatically option to yes as well, and pass options in here. That was what I forgot. And then it updates. So basically, you need these options to migrate. You need to set a new model and set which is the current version. You need to change wherever the attributes, or if you change the entity, you need to change that in your code. And once you run the application, you should not be having any issues. Okay. Any questions? Yeah. Now, Xcode does not have really I mean, honestly, Xcode is really a great IDE, and it gives you a lot of functionality, but Core Data was added, I don't want to say something wrong, but I think it was added in iOS 4 or iOS 5, like fully. So with every Xcode version, it gets better, but Xcode does not have answers for everything. My personal opinion, if you are more comfortable with SQL, if you're a SQL developer and you know how to work with SQL, then create your own classes which you can work exactly how you're used to in SQL. Otherwise, Core Data, once you know how it works, it really makes it easier to store and to request different data. Of course, at the beginning, it is a lot. You have to first go through all the settings, setting up the context and the models and everything. Once that's done, it gets just easier. But yeah, Core Data is not just like creating a table view and with a few lines of code. So you have to know what you're doing there. And going through Core Data in 3 hours, it's really just like kind of covering the surface. It's way more than that. And I have a little bit more information on that, and it really would be helpful because I'm not going to give too much assignment. All the assignment I'm going to give is really just to go through those PDFs and try to create step by step and try to understand what we went through, like today's class, and just not just really completely step by step, but try to modify different things on your own, how you would think your app would look like. And just try different updates, different scenarios, even if you break the app. Start over. I know I mean, you'll learn the most by trying different things, not just really going through the PDFs. The PDFs and what I'm trying to cover is what are the things you need to know, how to edit, how to delete, how to insert, how to search. And in the PDF, there are different scenarios how you can search if you search, let's say, about a date. But there's so much more. It is so much more, and just try different things out. Like, and a to-do list is honestly, it's a good example. Any developer should create a to-do list, even if there are tons of iOS apps, iOS to-do lists out there. A to-do list gives you every functionality you will need to work with the database, because you need to set up different, you need to work with dates, you need to work with text, you need to work with alerts, you need to insert, delete, edit, all of that functionality you can do with the to-do list. And just, yeah, try to create your own to-do list. That's basically what an assignment would be. I mean, you have all the tools in the PDF. It's a lot in there. Even if you just go step by step, I'm fine with that. But if you can add your own touch, I'd prefer it. And that gives me as well a little bit of an idea how you're following the class. And of course, again, email me at any time if you get stuck in something. And try to email me like in the first couple of days, not in the last 2 or 1.5 or 1 day. So I'm available to answer any questions you have in between. But just give me as well that 1.5 day, which I have to go through your code and check and see, so I'm prepared for the next class what issues to address. Good night, Melissa. Thanks, Charles. Have a good night. Good night, Linda.